Thank you all for being here, and I will give the mic to Yaeli.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Yaeli, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a staff program manager in the design operations team at GitHub. I grew up in Portugal, but I moved to London about 15 years ago, and and I'm currently in East London. I live with my family that you can see in the picture, and you can barely see my dog there trying to grab some food. I've been working on design operations for many years now, even before there was an actual name for it, but I didn't start as design operations. I studied communication design in Faro in the Algarve in the south of Portugal, and I started my professional design career as a web designer. A few years after that, I got a job in London, which was my dream, and I moved to London. I thought I was going to be walking to my job, my commute by the River Thames, and looking at this every day. But it was not like that. It was not too bad, but it was not like that. As my career progressed, I started to communicate more with clients and be in a lot more meetings and running workshops and doing research and things like that. And I also became super interested in design systems. Back when design systems also didn't have a name, we called it style guides. And I led many design systems projects. And design systems has a lot to do with facilitating better design and better engineering work. And just generally, the things that I was spending my time on was changing. I was not only just thinking about the visual and the front end, I was thinking about how to scale myself and how to not be a bottleneck and how to make things better for the team around me. So I was doing a lot of planning and road mapping, again, in a lot of meetings and just a lot of being in between people and information. And I really liked it. And this is not going to happen to everyone, but I was good at it. And perhaps I was better at it than as a designer. And I had enough years under my belt as a designer to see patterns in the ways that people worked and see how things could be made better. And basically, I was doing design operations. The term was not as common as it is now, but once I heard about it and I understood what it meant, I knew that my interest had moved on from being a designer. Today, we're going to see how design ops is a way for design teams to connect the dots and connect information and people and work, and how by being more aware of these connections, you can be more intentional about the kind of design operations work that you and your team prioritize, and also a few ways that we've been doing it at GitHub and how that's been working out for us. One question that I would like you to keep in mind throughout this talk is, are you the design ops person at your company or in your team without knowing it? Even if there is an official team or an official person, you still may be doing design ops things without realizing it. So what does exactly design ops mean? What is design ops? At a higher level, design ops is a connector. It connects designers to each other. It connects the design team to other parts of the company. It connects the design team to the design community. Basically, it connects people and information, and it connects people and work. At GitHub, we treat it like an API because just like an API, it lets you connect endpoints. It creates a system where you can interact between different types of things, and it hides the complexity of that system, only surfacing what's relevant and what's useful in that moment. And it makes these connections with purpose and with strategic vision. Many times this kind of work is invisible and unsung, a little bit like glue. And again, like glue, it's the kind of work that if you stop doing it, you start noticing the cracks start to show and people may be more demoralized, may be unhappy, the quality of the work may decrease, maybe people start leaving and so on. If the system is strong, if the API is well designed, it's easier to navigate between different parts of the system within design and also between design and other areas, and work should feel better and things should run more smoothly. Design ops looks very different in different companies and even in the same company at different times because it tries to fill the gaps that the team has. And every team is different and it needs to focus on different types of projects and initiatives at different times. You can usually divide things into 3 buckets, which is people, practices, and tools. And these buckets cover a lot of stuff that are currently listed on the screen. I'm not going to read everything. And this is just an example of a few things that it covers. And obviously, you can't do all of these things at once, even if you had a massive design operations team. It's not possible. Your team's priorities are going to determine what you need to focus on. So design ops brings a strategic vision to that long list of things so that you identify what you need to do, and then you design and implement solutions that get you there. So it brings strategy and implementation together instead of just implementing operational improvements without that bigger vision and bigger goals. So it's important to identify what's going to be more impactful to the team now and also in the future. So where are the design team's goals, for example, for the next few months to the next few years, and how can design operations support that? And it's also important to consider what's going to have a positive impact on the teams that work with design, so not just the design team. Are there any problems that are important to solve now that impact other teams that you're working with? And what would the world look like if you solved all of these problems? Design at GitHub, so design in general at GitHub, is made of different sub-teams that have different areas of responsibility. Design operations, the design operations team, was formed officially in early 2002 as a cohesive unit that is working together and across the whole design department. We were doing design operations before, but without the same kind of intentionality and just look at the future and having that bigger vision. Some of the design operations team members are embedded in a specific design team, but we also work on initiatives across the entire design department. I was part of the design systems team for a very long time. So most of the examples today are specific to the design systems team, which is good because this is the design systems week. But now I'm working more on initiatives across the whole department as well. And our design operations team is definitely still designing our design ops API. We're not close to being stable yet. As a software company and as a developer-focused product, GitHub is always going to have more engineers than it has designers. So how can we deliver design value with working with all of our partners across the company and not be a bottleneck? How can we raise the bar when it comes to the design quality and user experience, and also at the same time make design more accessible to more people within the company? This kind of thinking informs how we design that API, how we define those endpoints and connections between design and designers and the company. And also something to note in most of our initiatives is that we always try to use our own GitHub tooling so that we can be closer to engineering and closer to how the rest of the company works. There's a lot of things that we want to work on and things that we haven't had time to do at all. And there's things that we've tried and implemented and worked really well, and also stuff that didn't work so well. We're always learning, and this is really important to understand that no one has everything figured out, even larger companies. Things always look really nice, really lovely when you're seeing from the outside, but what you don't see from the outside is the messy wardrobes inside the house. So saying that, let's look at a few examples of the design operations work. So the first example is the design onboarding projects. So GitHub has a feature called projects, which is a little bit like Kanban boards with a bunch of cool features on it. And we created these lists of tasks and resources that you can do and read in your first day, first week, first month, and so on. And we did this because we have teams all over the world in different time zones. And on top of that, everyone has a flexible schedule. So there's a lot of quiet times. You're not constantly going to have someone in your team working at the same time as you. And we wanted people to feel like they were learning and understanding the company and how the company works at their own pace, and also learning by using our own tools and by getting familiar with the product. And also we wanted to remove a lot of time-consuming and manual work from design managers and wanted to add consistency to the onboarding experience. So we were establishing a baseline for a good experience for all new designers. When we launched these project boards, we gathered feedback from managers, from new team members, from their onboarding buddies, And the feedback was very positive initially. People would say, oh, I didn't have anything like this in my previous company. It was really useful. But we also heard about things to improve. For example, because these project boards did not live in a central place for all the different teams, each team has had their own copy, own instance of the board. You can imagine that it was pretty hard to keep the information that was relevant across the whole department up to date. So it was hard to make the changes everywhere. And just some of the information was confusing or was missing. And you only learn these things if you proactively seek feedback when you implement and when you try something. Just like a designer would seek feedback on their work, it's important to also get feedback and improve on processes. It's important to document the feedback and see if there's trends, and also measure the progress that you make. So ideally, you would try and gather data about how things are before you implement something and then after, so that you can understand if you made a difference. And this can be as easy as sending super short surveys to the team before and after you've tried things. Many times, things just need a few tweaks and edits to make the information in the process more clear or more simple to use, but you won't know that if you don't seek that feedback. And it's also good to just come back to processes that you've implemented and check if they're still fit for purpose at different stages of their lives, because something that worked well in the beginning may not work so well a year or 2 years later as the team changes and things change. The second example is about how the design systems team worked with other teams. So the design systems team has partnerships with other departments, other parts of the company, and other teams are dependent on the work of the design system to deliver on their own commitments. We were trying to find a good way for people to come to us with proposals and requests in a way that we could balance their team needs and their own deadlines with our own timelines, as we were building foundational infrastructure for the design system. And we need to maintain a system that scales in a sustainable way, which generally means going slower than feature teams. There were various ways to approach the design system team. So there was no single point of entry, which in itself was already a barrier, because even before you got started with the process of getting in touch with us or communicating with us, you're already a little bit confused, and that's not having a great experience. We did a few things to improve this, like centralizing all of the information, all of the project boards, issues, all the guides in a single repository dedicated just to the design system that didn't exist before. And we simplified how many Slack channels existed to ask for help, because that was confusing. And we also created a few different issue templates that people could use to request help and propose ideas. These were just a few of the things. We've also explored different ways to communicate progress and communicate upcoming work and our priorities. We created a fairly simplified high-level project board with our roadmap that was easier to understand and consume by people in other teams that wanted to understand how they could fit into our plans. And another thing we did was we started publishing a more editorialized version of a change log, where we were highlighting key changes and calls for comment and what's next and things like that. But with all of these changes, it's hard to balance what makes sense to improve for our partners and how those changes affect the teams and how the team works. For example, as we were simplifying the project board for other teams to understand it, we made it harder for the design systems team to have the granularity that they needed to understand what they needed to be working on. So we had to address that. And if you make too many changes all the time, people depend more and more on PMs and design operations to know how to navigate the process itself, which is not good. So one of my goals when I'm working on anything is to not be needed once the process is established. I get bored very quickly. I really like to move between lots of projects, and I don't love to work on the same thing for a very long time. So if I'm needed for something to continue to run smoothly forever, I'm not doing me and I'm not doing the team any favors. So thinking about removing yourself out of the equation is a good way to create processes that are clear to understand and that are well documented and that don't feel like a burden on the team. I have implemented systems and processes that once I took 1 or 2 weeks off, it fell apart. And to me, that's a clear sign that something needs to be changed if the system can't be easily maintained. Just for like any API, maintainability is super important. And you can, again, always come back sometime later to revisit the systems that you've implemented and adapt and change things to your current needs. But you shouldn't have to handhold everyone through every single process that you implement, or you're never going to be able to move on to the next thing. The third example is about how we shared work in progress within the design systems team. So the previous example was about working with other teams, and this is more about the dynamics within the design systems team itself. So one of the most common feedback from the team was that people wanted to know, what is the rest of the team working on? Back then, the team had around 20 people divided into different teams, different projects, different objectives, everyone in different meetings. And we tried a few different things. We tried setting up a weekly show and tell where everyone could share what they were working on in a more deep dive. We also tried doing quicker lightning shares where you only had like 2 or 3 minutes to share what you were working on. We also tried more async things like asking people to post weekly in Slack or in a GitHub discussion with links to their prototypes or videos of them walking through the work, and then people could comment. And we also tried having something more ad hoc where maybe people could post whenever they wanted with short videos and comments in Slack. And none of these solutions was perfect. They were not all bad, but nothing was perfect. For example, for live meetings, time zones always get in the way when people are all over the world. With asynchronous posts, people just tend to forget, and other things that they have to do, other tasks get in the way, and also not everyone engages. And also some people are just really good at sharing in meetings. Others really love to share in writing or in videos. We also tried forcing everyone to share, and we also tried to making it voluntary. Again, there was no perfect solution. We kept iterating and trying new things based on feedback and what we could see that was working or not. And to me, this highlights a design ops conundrum, which is you don't want to continue a ritual that is not working just because it's in the calendar, but you also can't be changing things all the time. You need to give things time to trial them and see if they meet the objectives that you had for them. Maybe you started things in an unusual week or an unusual month. So how can you create a culture where people are happy to change, but also understand that humans need a certain degree of stability in their lives, and you can't keep throwing breaking changes at them? Finally, there's a lot of things that we still want to work on in the future. For example, we would love to have an improved designer onboarding process, which is something that we don't have. I'm sure that a lot of companies do. But so this would be something like a GitHub designer bootcamp that when someone joins, you would introduce them to how design works at GitHub, how to create a sense of community and that sense that you're all part of the same team, and just start establishing those relationships and that trust, which is really important to create great design and good collaboration. And it would also help the design systems team in a bunch of ways, like having a consistent way of introducing new people to the design system and reducing the dependency on the team to be available one-on-one for introductions to the system. And this is just one example of projects that the design operations team would like to work on. And it's an example of the kind of project design ops tends to lead because it has a lot of moving parts and it could also have a big impact across the company. It would mean collaboration between design managers, product designers, design systems team, and other disciplines like product management and engineering that could also potentially both contribute to the materials and also use the materials themselves. I could list projects that I would like to work on for another hour or two if I needed to. It's just a never-ending list. I just wanted to give you an example of something that we have not done yet. And maybe you have done it. Maybe you have done it, but we haven't had time to do that yet. So I hope some of this resonated with you and with things that you have seen in your company and maybe gaps that you've noticed and weren't sure how to solve or even weren't sure who should solve it. I just have two more things that I want to share with you before I wrap up. So the first one is that you shouldn't start from scratch in design operations. You should look for things that are working well and try to amplify them. So for example, is there a meeting that always leaves people energized, or was there an issue or a ticket or a discussion that generated a lot of good discussion and engagement? And what was good about them and how can you replicate that? Design ops should always look for ways to connect existing systems in the company and not create everything from scratch as well. So maybe, let's say HR, human resources, has implemented the foundations of something that you need to improve, or maybe engineering has already defined the process that you also want to try in design. A lot of the design ops work is deeply connected with the work being done in different parts of the company. The second point is that long list of potential things a design ops team could be working on is probably being done by someone, even if you don't have an actual official team or person. And this work usually tends to be done by people with different titles like design managers, project managers, designers. They usually pick up a lot of this work on top of everything else that they need to do. So can you think of someone that you work with who maybe are always happy to drive projects that are not really part of their main job, or someone who always organizes the teams, get-togethers and other events, or who makes sure that designers have everything they need and are not blocked to do their work? Who is doing this now at your company? Could it potentially be you? Is this work rewarded, celebrated, seen? Are these folks able to highlight these kinds of efforts when it's time for their performance reviews, or are they being penalized for, quote unquote, wasting time on these things? If they are, then obviously that's holding them back. So should be doing the work that will get them promoted instead. And should this work be delegated and shared or even dropped altogether? If people are maintaining this design ops API single-handedly on top of everything else they need to do, that's not sustainable. That's not a maintainable API, and at some point it's going to break. If, like me, you actually enjoy this part of the work more and maybe don't have an official design ops title, could it be time to think about a career change? I don't know. There's a lot more, obviously, to talk about design ops and changing careers. My wish is just that what you've heard here today gives you a better picture of how design ops can slot and fit into the day-to-day of a well-functioning design team, and can be the glue that connects the dots, the people, the knowledge, the work together. And if you thought of someone in your company that is quietly in the background making sure that everything is running smoothly and the machine is well-oiled, maybe just let them know that you see them and that you appreciate them. And that's all for me.
Nice. Thank you very much. There were a lot of emojis cheering you on during the presentation and recognizing the things you thought. We might not have a lot of time for questions. I'm not sure how you are in your time, if you have a few more minutes to answer any questions. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I do.
So one question is from Jeroen, our resident researcher. He's asking, do you connect research ops with design ops? Do you have any experience with that or getting it started in an organization?
Well, I don't have direct personal experience, but we do have one of the members of the design operations team is embedded in the research team. So she's fully dedicated to the research team, and she's currently in the process of establishing research ops and all the processes and systems that go along with it.
Yes, super nice. So I think that will answer the question. I also really liked how you mentioned that things might change over time, like the teams might change over time, that you have to adjust based on that, not necessarily based on organization of other external needs. One thing you mentioned is sharing things continuously, etc. And I wonder, have a few questions about that. How do you encourage shy folks to speak up in Slack or in discussions, or do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I think it depends. Obviously, I guess I could say it depends for every question you ask. But to be more specific, it's so like I said, some people you can immediately see that they're very comfortable sharing in any format, writing, sharing a video, sharing in meetings. Other people, and so, like for example, sometimes it's not even about not wanting to share per se, but maybe they just need some time to think. They like to think about what they want to say next, and maybe in a meeting they can't just formulate what they're trying to say. So I always like to, for example, not make decisions in that moment and leave some space. If it's in a meeting, leave some space after if someone has anything else to say, and not just say like in the meeting, okay, we've made this decision, or we're doing this design review and this is exactly what it's going to be done. So sometimes it's just a matter of time, giving people time to think about it. Other times, like I've spent many years helping people to write blog posts and share, and I know that sometimes people just need a little bit of coaching, like just literally working together one-on-one and see, okay, let's try and think about how you can share this information or write this post, and just spending 15 or 20 minutes with them to actually write it down. Obviously, it's not very scalable, but
there
it
are
does
so many
help.
cool things that people do, right? And if they once get like the encouragement from positive feedback and hey, like that's exactly the thing I've been wondering about, they might share more.
Yeah.
You also mentioned sharing prototypes. Like sometimes it might be super impressive what people are sharing, and it's like super high fidelity, and like I might feel shy, like sharing my prototype. It's really not as cool. It's just work in progress, and also I don't have time to polish it anymore. Do you? How do you go about sharing those? Like, do you encourage sharing prototypes specifically, or do you also share finished work?
I think so. One drawback of having a well-established design system is that it's really easy to prototype something that looks high fidelity, and maybe you haven't actually spent a lot of time with it. But I think it just changes. It's just so dependent on the person. Like some people still really really like to draw and just take a photo of like a wireframe or a sketch or whatever, and just put it somewhere, either in a GitHub issue or in Figma for people to comment. But again, because we have a more established design system, it's also fairly easy to create either Figma prototypes or like actual code prototypes. And our designers tend to be fairly comfortable with code, so you also there's like a lot of blurred lines in terms of like who's sharing what kind of prototype, which I think is cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I guess I hope this is a great encouragement for everybody here to just share what you're up to and what your ideas are. Thank you so much, Yaeli, for being here with us today, sharing your insights and your encouragement for people to have their work recognized and maybe thinking of changing career paths and even, well, not changing anything in their work, basically. So that's very cool.